Alright, first step is to put the car in the jack. Next, it's a good idea to block your tires, your front tires. Next, you want to jack up the corner of the car where you want to put in the arms. Recommend using a jack pad. This one right here goes into one of the holes on the pad, keeps it lined up, keeps it in place, and gives you space away from the battery so you don't damage it. Jack is in place with the jack pad. Break the lug nuts loose. Finish taking the lug nuts off with an impact or a wrench, however you prefer. So I just pulled the tire off. There's an inner tire wear, outer tire wear. This is all caused by the excessive negative camber on the S and X, which the camber and toe arms will correct. Make sure you get a safety jack in there. Do not put it under the battery. Here's a good look at the two arms. You got the camber arm on the right and the toe arm on the left. This is on the left rear side of my Model X. Those will be coming out soon. All right, next we're going to take off this arm for the height sensor. You just need to pry it off. A little trick to prying this off is it's very flexible, so you want to get as close to this opening as possible and try to pull with your hand that direction. It will flex all over the place. Next, I'm going to break loose this outer camber arm bolt. If you've got an impact that's strong enough, you may not need to break it with a wrench or socket. Mine is not strong enough, so I'm going to break it loose, then I'll pull it out with the impact. You have to unscrew it. Here we're getting ready to remove the upper camber arm bolt. It's an 18-inch or 18-millimeter socket on the head of the bolt and an 18-millimeter wrench on the nut. I'm going to break it loose and then pull it free with the impact. You may find it a little tight in there. To use a ratchet, depending on the size of it, you may have to revert back to a wrench. Again, a little tricky, a little tight, but very doable. Once that nut breaks loose on the back side, at least mine came off pretty easy. It's seen a couple of winters too, so if you're in a nice dry climate with no winters, it should come off like a breeze. Okay, the top bolt is removed from the camber arm and the bottom bolt. Now it's time to pop the arm out. If you put a screwdriver behind this and pry out, it slides out pretty good. To get this arm out easier, you should start with the top. There's a little more room to work with, and then go towards the outside. So pop that down and then slide that out. What helps as well to get this thing out is to grab here and wiggle this as you push and pull to rock this thing out, and then it just slides out. Did not remove this ball because there's one on the new arms. There's the two arms side by side. Really no comparison. If you have to take it to an alignment shop, it's a good idea to line the new one up with the old one. At least you're not making it any worse. Once you get it to the shop, they can do what these things are meant to do. So just stick the bolts in, line them up. This one out of the box was perfectly lined up to start, so it shouldn't be a big issue. When you put this arm in, you want to put this side in first by the wheel, and then this end you want to lift up, pull this out a little bit and wiggle it, kind of like we did when we pulled it out, and then come in from the front side here, because the tabs are widened up a little bit challenging getting up from the bottom, but once you get into this front, then you can start pushing it in. It's beneficial to get this joint in first. You may need to get a screwdriver or whatnot to line it up to the hole as you're moving this thing around. But once you get it lined up, you can get that bolt in there, and that will help push the other one into the slot. All right, now we want to just snug this up. Not tight, don't want to torque it down, but just get it in the hole all the way. After you get this bolt in down here, you can snug that up. Get that bolt in there, snug it up, don't torque it down. You need to wait to do that when everything's put back together. Need to put this level sensor arm back on to the camber arm. To get the tow arm out, you'll have to cut this zip tie strap and replace it later. To break loose the outer tow arm bolt and nut, you may need to use a ratchet with a socket. It's an 18mm head and an 18mm nut. You can also use an impact to take this off for the toe outer bolt. To get that upper toe arm bolt and nut off, you'll need an 18-inch wrench, or 18mm wrench, sorry, and a 19mm socket or wrench. So once the nut is off, this bolt slides out very easily. However, there's not enough room to get it out because this bolt was put in at the factory before the body was put on. So what we'll have to do is clamp onto that bolt with a pair of vice grips and get a carbide tip blade and cut it off. Here's a recommended Sawzall blade you can use to cut through that bolt. Here you can see there's a pair of vice grips on the bolt to hold it still, and then you can cut just to the left of that vice grips. So put the vice grips close to the head of the bolt in an upside down fashion so you can lower the vice grips out of the way, and then you need to cut upwards into the bolt. It's about the only way you can get access to it. Might consider putting lubricant on that bolt and watch this line. Hold your Sawzall back away from it. Consider putting a spacer in there too. Once that head's cut off, slide the bolt out to the right or left if you're on the other side. When you line up the tow arm to the old tow arm, if you need to adjust it some, just put on a vice grip or a vise and adjust it out until it lines up. That way you're all set with the original alignment until you get it aligned. Just adjust the length of the arm by turning the wrench clockwise or counterclockwise. Note the two tow arms are identical, so one side will be facing one way with the bolts, the other side will be facing the other way. When installing the tow arm, make sure the clamp portion is facing down so you don't run into the frame. Make sure you zip tie the wire to the side, not the top. To attach the tow arm to the frame, use the N2itive supplied bolt and nut. When installing the arm on the knuckle, use the factory supplied bolt and nut and torque it down. Make sure you don't torque this bolt and the previous bolt until you put load back onto the vehicle. As you see, I have the level sensor disconnected. Make sure you attach that back. Lift the vehicle up by the knuckle at the bottom. Load it up. Torque everything down. Be sure to torque down the two clamps. One uses a T30, one uses a T45 socket or bit. Adjust your length to match the original length of the original arm, and then when you get it aligned, they can adjust that appropriately. This gets torqued to 25 foot-pounds, this gets torqued to 15 foot-pounds. You want to make sure you attach your wires to the side of the tow arm, not on top. If you put it on top, there's a risk of them being cut by the frame. Now that you've got all the clamps torqued down, you need to put load onto the arms and lift the car up off of the jack and the jack stands. Keep the jack stand there for safety. And then you need to torque all the bolts at the end of the camber arm and the end of the tow arms if you have them. When putting the car load on the jack under the control arms, make sure you put the car back into standard height and try to adjust the jack and backup jack and safety jack where the car is as level as you can get it. Then torque down your bolts. Here you can see the two jacks. One's a backup for the frame. The other one is lifting up under the bottom control arm of the rear wheel. So it's fully loaded. Then you torque down the bolts. So this is the upper bolt on the camber arm. Torque that down to 96 foot-pounds. The bolt that connects to the knuckle on the camber arm gets torqued down to 103 foot-pounds. Torque the tow arm upper bolt that connects to the subframe to 59 foot-pounds. Torque the tow arm to the knuckle, bolt and nut to 96 foot-pounds. Put the car back into jack mode to put the tire back on. Snug the lug nuts down. Lower the car down to put a little friction on the wheel and torque down to 129 foot-pounds on the lug nuts. Put the car back into standard height or wherever you want it. Everything's ready. You repeat all the same steps for the opposite side and then take it to your local shop or Tesla service center and they can align it to your desire. There you have it. The camber arm and the tow arm are holding the weight of the car. Now all that's left to do is align the vehicle.